Okay, so this one is going to be a pretty easy one, to at least to see. This was a sign that I photocopied it. It's a sign that I was making on Etsy with on a wooden craft board and using acrylic paint and acrylic paint pens. So I want to repost this listing, but I want to make the original watercolor painting, watercolor and ink pen, and then I want to repost it also as a print and as a greeting card if it turns out to be absolutely beautiful, which is the goal, right? So I've got my basic watercolor paints here. I kind of did use the carbon to take the original design I made and just carbon it out. And this is handmade paper. So this particular pack is from a different supplier. It's pretty fibrous, so we'll see how it does when it gets wet. It absorbs a lot of color. I've noticed that already, more than the other paper that I was using. So again, handmade paper, we get different effects with it, which is why it's so beautiful. I'm just gonna go around the outside with some peach, brighten it up a little bit. Try not to get it too wet. It'll probably dry faster than I can get back to these flowers though, so that's always a good thing. I'm going to use a real bright yellow in here and some white. Kind of go with the original color scheme, but change it up a little bit. Make the colors a little bit brighter. So again, this is just like a very light peach wash. I'm trying to get into in and around, so it looks like the color is the background. Give me a little darker pot here. Haven't thought through the whole thing yet, but that's kind of part of the fun of, well, part of the process, watercolor painting. Make sure we get all the way up to the edge there of that pot. Go, come in through here, give our tips. Watercolor has that look to it. Makes it so beautiful that it's blurry sometimes, and especially mine. It's mousse watercolor, and I think it makes it much more pretty. So I'm going to switch to a smaller brush and get in the middle of these without running over all my lines, so I don't have to repaint everything. I'm not going to add a whole lot more color. Just going to spread it out. Now on watercolor paper, I would say you could always go back and move this. I think it's possible with this paper, but it will be a lot harder once it's absorbed into these fibers to move anything around. So that's why I'm kind of sticking with light. Because once it dries, I don't know how hard it would be to get it to move. Go. Nice peach background. Some peach in all the little spots showing through the flowers. These tall, pointy flowers, I like to call them my Dr. Seuss flowers. They're not any kind of real flower I've ever seen, but they mimic a lot of tall flowers. Coming back in here with more peach. some spots be a little darker than others, especially like maybe underneath the flowers where you expect to see, you know, a bit more dark. That was a bit much. Spread that out a little bit. In here. This paper, it is buckling a little bit, but you see this flower is supposed to be an extension of that, so I'll just cover that up when I get down there with a different color. And I think I see some fibers coming up out the paper. Let's see. It's probably pretty good for the peach. There we go. We'll see as I get more colors in. I feel like there's not much color up here. This area. Switch over to my bigger brush. Make sure I cover the top. There we go. I put these in a mat that shrinks them, showcases the 8x10 area in the center. But I like to go all the way to the edge in case anybody wants to frame it in a floating frame and let the beautiful edges of the paper show, which is my ideal way to see them framed, but everybody has their own way. They want to see it in their own home, so it's fine. Okay. Now our paper is peach. Okay, now I want to come in with, I have some white mixed up back here, just about mixed up with some very light blue. And I think that's the color I'm going to make the pot, like in the original, it's kind of gray, light blue. I think this will be a nice color for the pot. Let me water that down a little bit, and there we go. Now you can see it. And again, I define all of the edges in these pieces with an ink pen. So you're going to be able to see the edge of the pot because it's going to be in black ink. Got a lot of paint on here. I might as well spread it out. A little more than I planned. It's because I got this tube of white watercolor. So my pot is here. And on the pot it says it takes a long time to grow an old friend. It kind of disappeared. I can still see it, and I'm gonna write it back in there with my ink pen. My pot was crooked when I drew it, and it's going to be crooked when I finish it. It's, I think in the center of these, instead of the peach color, I want to go with more of an orange color for the brightness. So these are the centers of our flowers. Right. And see, I said with the watercolor, you get that little bit of run, and that works for me. I like that. And this paper is wet all over, so any place one color meets another, it's gonna run. And a little bit more orange here. Again, we probably will have a little run at the end where they meet right here. we go. That's better already. Cute. All right, I want a nice bright yellow for the circles. So let's get some bright yellow in here. Let me see if this brush is small enough. And I may need to let this dry because that one just took off. The paper's so wet. I'm going to try working with a smaller brush and see if I can still do it. Yeah, as long as I'm careful not to just slap it down there, it seems to be working. So we're getting all this nice bright yellow. This one, here, I'm just going to take a rag and stop that spread right there. Get rid of that spreading yellow circle. Try to keep it inside the circle so it doesn't take off anymore. This teeny brush. Another circle. And that one's very wet. It's like a big puddle right there. So we're gonna kick that back too, and just let this go to the places where it's not so wet, and I'll come back in when it's a little drier. Because I do want my circles to look like circles. This, I might be able to do a little bit in here, and then I'll have to wait for it to dry before I continue. I was trying to take off. They're all trying to take off. Alright, so let's let, I mean, it's going to be fine. I'm going to outline it with pen anyway. But since some of them are really spreading, I'm just going to stop them. Stop the spread. Let's see. And let it dry for a few minutes. Looks like these ran together over here, so I'll come back in and refine the line on the edge of my pot. And once it's a little bit drier, come back in and add more of my flower colors. Okay, so this has had time to dry, and I am going to come back in with my tiny brush and get my yellow circles in place. It was just too wet before. Everything was running together. Bright yellow circles. Much easier when it's had a chance to dry. There we go. The ones that started to run and I blotted them off, I can put that color back in. Looks like a piece of one. Okay. And between these two flowers, here. All right. Feel like there should be. See, that goes up, that goes up. I feel like there should be some over here too. So let's just make some real quick. So they're going to be outlined with ink pen. We'll have one poking out from back here. And let's just make one here. And here. Let's see. Yeah, that's better. A little more even. Okay. Darken these in a little. Okay, so we've got some bright yellow circles added in there. I think I'm going to do teal for these flowers and some kind of, I don't know what kind of flowers they are. Again, most of my flowers are Dr. Seuss flowers. Going to keep it kind of dry. Fill in the teal. It's a little dark. Spread it out a little bit. So I used carbon to create this from the photocopy I had from a sign I had made and sold on Etsy. And I can just cover up that carbon line, or I can wait and go back in and get it with the ink pen at the end. But if I want to change the shape a little bit, I can just go right over top of the carbon line, especially with this color because it's dark. Alright, so blues are in. These little Dr. Susie flowers, I keep calling them, those tall ones. I'm going to do like a lavender, pinkish lavender color for those. And then these shapes in here are the leaves. Kind of looking back at my previous example. Remember where I was going with this. There we go. So again, I am just going to spread this pinkish purple color out and go over top of the carbon lines like I'm going to do right here. That is a leaf, so I will cover that with green. And this comes up here. We've got some more pinkish purple. Blue is probably still wet, so I don't want to get too close to that. Don't want to run them together. And if it happens, it can always be covered up. I lost my line here, but I know what shape these are. I make them all the time. I want this to come out a little bit. Here it's pretty wide. Just put my whole sleeve in the watercolors. Light that my carbon line's really messy here, so I'm just going to cover all that up with this paint. There we go. And again, I'm going to go around the outlines of these, or outline these, go around the edges and outline these with a black felt tipped pen. So if I make a little mistake and go a little too far, that's where my pen mark will go. It'll still look like it's been outlined and like it was intentional. There we go. Alright, that's better. So this, I'm going to bring all the way down underneath of what I just pointed out was actually a leaf. So I'm not even going to have to cover that up. It's just going to change the shape of the leaf a little bit. Come back up here with a little bit more. This paper is definitely just sucking it all up. I'm going to use my bright green, my new favorite green, which is obviously the one that's disappearing the fastest, for my leaves. Real watercolor artisty, I can add a deeper green and do some shading. So I think I will be kind of watercolor artisty and just do a touch of deeper green down here, a little shading going. I think it's a little bit darker at the bottom than it is at the top. Where, the light is more at the top, if the light's coming from above, which I would assume. So we've got another leaf here. Green, darker green, and again over here because it doesn't really seem to show up very much. Okay, that's better. And then the base of this white flower, it's a flower bud, is also going to be green. So I'm going to put some green back in here. I'm going to assume it's going to be a little bit darker. That's the bud. So I'll do that here. That's nice. Dark. This is still really wet, so it'll have to dry before I see how dark it is. Okay. And let's see, I'm going to let that dry because I want to come back in with white. But while I'm waiting, I can clean my brush a little bit and go back over to this pop color and try to get my line back. My peach ran in and took over. I'm using a much smaller brush and I have to feather this out, but it's okay. to do that on stop. Like I was saying, be all watercolor artisty. Add some darker orange right here at the bottom. Yeah, I'm assuming my light's coming from this way, which is my normal place that my light comes from. I should work on changing that up. And this in the bottom here could definitely be darker. It is underneath of all of it. Got a little yellow running over here. It's okay. Just get rid of it. That's progress. All right, so I think I got us a better view of what I'm working on. Go back to my reference photo, and I'm just going to use my white watercolor in the tube. I'm going to come back in to this, and I'm going to make my daisies white. So everything else is dry here, and this is why I get the white watercolor in the tubes, much easier. Pretty much all white, but I think I'm going to do a little bit of shading. I mean, the thing is, I'm going to use the ink pen at the end, so I get to cheat and outline it. I love watercolor and ink pen. I really do. I think it's awesome, especially on this paper. So, we are. Filling in the daisies. So, what I didn't show was that my purple came down a little too far right here, and I know that I want another petal here. I just neglected to fill it in when I was carboning, so I kind of took some water and got the purple really wet and dabbed it back off and let it dry, and here we are. And that gives me room to put this petal right here where that purple was. Going right over top of my peach. Any place it ran over the lines, which is not a big deal. Nice bright white flowers. And once you've carboned out lightly what kind of design you want, really just filling in with this tiny brush. It's not that hard to get used to it. Go, this petal comes back over the top. I should use all watercolor tubes for this reason, but this is so portable, my pan, with my paints all together in it. So here we go. I think that's, oh, and then there's a bud over here. A little flower bud filled in. I think I'll make it a little messier. It looks a little too neat for a flower bud. There we go. Okay. Now I'm just going to come back in, get this white out of the brush. I'm going to come back in with, it's a very dull yellow. And see, oh, that's a lot of very dull yellow. Try my brush down a little bit. See if I want to just add some shading like that. I don't know if it's going to make a whole lot of difference, but it might add a little bit of something. And I'm just thinking about where it might be a little bit darker. It's going to be lighter up on top because my light's coming from up here. And this is very light, very subtle. Yeah, I think that's good. I think that gives it a little something extra. My spot is right where I hit that first spot. I was a little heavy with the yellow. So whiten my petal back up a little bit, blend it back out. Make sure they're all blended actually. That's better. Okay. All right, we're making significant progress here with the flower bouquet. I'm going to come in with this tiny liner brush, and I'm going to use my little bit darker green that I kind of blended in here, and I'm going to get my flower stems. Let me look at my example. Where did my flower stems go? Yeah. I'm going to get my flower stems in, just kind of tiny lines. There's one here that attaches to this leaf. My brush is pretty dry. Make sure we can see that. There we go. Come back in and get a little bit more paint on that. And then there's one over here with no leaf attached to it. It's a plain stem. Go, and I think I'm going to need some other colors. Oh, this one has a stem too. It's the same type of flower. It's just the flower bud. This has to come here. And I gotta choose. I could choose colors for the other stems. I'm not sure if I want to just do them in ink. Let's see. Let's get a different green altogether. That'll be a good idea because this tiny brush we can make stems with. So I'm going to do the Dr. Seuss flowers with this olive green. And we'll do one over here. And we've got a Dr. Seuss flower back here. So presumably the stem is kind of coming down behind all this stuff. We still want it to be in there. Ooh, little run over. It was a little wetter. I don't have, oh, I have my sleeve. There we go. I'll stop that right there and just come back and cover that up with white. It's just a little spillover. So we have that Dr. Seuss flower, that Dr. Seuss flower, and this one kind of comes all the way into the pot, so I don't need a stem for that. Yeah, that one wasn't quite dark enough. A little too wet. darken it in a little bit. It's a dry brush. Try to get it to look as dark as the other Dr. Seuss flower stems. And I think most of the rest of this is going to be pen work. I'm just looking around to see if I have any other ideas. I do think it's going to be pen, so I will get out my pen while this dries. Okay, so reference picture. I didn't use the stencil for this one. I'm just going to use my handwriting, which is works pretty well for most of my Etsy sales, so I go with it. I looked online at different alphabets, and I chose one that was a mix of lowercase and uppercase, and I printed it out and started practicing it, and it has become my handwriting. So thank goodness I'm not in grade school anymore, because it's you know, not accurate, but it works. Okay, I just don't want to leave a lot of pencil marks underneath. I can see through this to where I am filling in this little quote. It takes a long time to grow an old friend. And I'm using this felt tip pen. Like I said, works great on this paper, and works great going over top of watercolor. I don't know if you can see, there's a little spot right here. This is handmade paper, so you just never know. I mean, this is like 100% cotton. There are so many different fibers, and the process of making paper is more than I have patience or room for in my life right now. But blemishes are kind of part of it. Sometimes things pop up. Most of my Etsy customers love the paper, and they get it. She was somebody's grandmother, because she said it was a gift for her granddaughter. She messaged me on Etsy and told me she hated it. She hated the item. I can't believe you didn't notice how blotchy this paper was. It was handmade paper, so I just... You know, what are you gonna do? It wasn't any more blotchy than any of my other handmade paper, but if you weren't expecting it, you weren't expecting it. Takes almost there with this little quote. Now, if the pen gets clogged up, I'll just have to clean off the tip a little bit, run it around on some paper. So far, it's doing really well. It takes a long time to grow an old friend. My lettering typically is not always perfectly even, but some places it can be darkened up here to look a little more consistent. Go. And practice makes perfect with this. I've really got a feel for, after making thousands of Etsy orders on this paper, got a feel for what kind of pressure to use to get the the effect that I want. So you see here, it's still rustic. I mean, it's not the stenciled lettering that's in the example, because I've kind of moved away from that for most things. All right, so that's still, I just felt something damp. I'm getting ready to go up there and start working on those flowers. I have, I don't even know. Sometimes my line work just, line work. I had drawn in some lines here with pen. I think that's what makes it, you know, interesting, unique. It's obviously very handmade, hand-drawn, so I kind of go with that. So I'm going to leave that like that for now. And I'm going to get this crooked pot marked out. I'm going to flip it around so I can keep my hands out of the watercolor. Mark out the other side of the crooked pot. And then I'm going to let it dry for a second and work up into the top. Okay, I think we're dry up here. I started filling in a little bit way up in the outer area here where I knew my hand wasn't going to drag across any wet paint. So here I am with my felt tipped pen outlining my flowers. This one kind of disappears. These are my Dr. Seuss purple flowers. I guess they're, to me, they're like lavender, but they're not always purple, so they're not always lavender. Here we go. Make some fun little curves going on. Not being perfect. I'm trying to cover up most of my carbon lines, but I'm not getting every single line perfectly covered, and again, that's okay. I know I'm going to have these little yellow flowers as well. So for them, simple. See, I kind of have to envision where's the stem going to come out. Right about here. Connect them to the stem. There's another purple flower. I don't know if you can see, if I've got enough good light here. There was like a green that ran out a little bit here and ran over into the yellow. I mean, it's really, once you define your shapes with this pen, it really doesn't matter. So I'm assuming it's coming here, here, and down, and then I'm going to connect these to it. I didn't really plan that out at all. Okay, gotta come up here and catch these. Peeking out. I try really hard, I mean, as much as I love Bob Ross, I try really hard not to sound like him, but sometimes I do.
little flowers just peeking on out. Okay, now, yeah, see, I didn't plan that out. These are kind of hanging over here with no stem. So we're going to just connect them like that. Purple, purple, purple. Okay, and then we've got these. I'm going to run along the green lines to accentuate the stems and then get my leaves going here. So I'm going to come right off the stem. Do the same thing here. Bring this leaf right off the stem. Make sure everything connects properly. There we go. Okay, this one, this little bud, stem can come this way. And it's partially closed, so I'm just kind of assuming my little scrumble thing. Alright. This is one of our giant daisies. Well, they're not giant, but they're the largest flowers. So they're coming up like this. Some flowers are peeking out from behind the other ones. There we go. Now this orange flower is where, you know, the color kind of ran. It's a very minor detail. It's not a big deal. Here we go. These are just fun. When I first started on Etsy, this is how I did everything. This is what I knew how to do. But it's still fun to go back and do it every once in a while. Here we go. We're just going to put some little marks here. Some details go in. Some details go in here. And I think we just need a little bit of some marks in the flowers. Oops, there we go. Too much fun. Too much fun. Alright, and then we put some little dots in the center. Gotta control myself. I'll have it so filled up. It'll become something completely different if I just keep letting myself play around with it. But it is fun. This part is fun, adding in the detail. All of it's fun, really. Okay. And then I'm just going to give a little more, I don't know, fluffiness over here to my Dr. Susie lavenders. They look a little more roughly. And you know, my leaves, I typically just do a single line. I don't know why I don't do veining, but these flowers here, let me think about this. I want them to be connected. Also, I'm trying to decide if I want to add any detail. More stems coming through. Normally, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take some of this white watercolor. I'm trying not to cheat and grab a paint pen because I said it's watercolor and ink pen. I'm trying to prepare myself to really do some educational videos, and I don't want to be cheating by grabbing something that isn't really part of what I said I was going to do. So I'm just going to use some watercolor. This is white from the tube, so it's thicker. And accentuate the centers of these blue flowers. Now, this watercolor I already kind of squeezed out into my pan in the corner. Once it dries out, you can just come back and wet it again and use it later, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, that is better. Let me have a look at this and see. I think I should call it finished, but I tend to, at this point near the end, want to just do all kinds of things to it. So let me have a look at it and see how I feel about it. I definitely think it rivals the original, which was done on acrylic paint, and obviously the paper's been used as a scratch paper for ink pens and pens. But yeah, that's very pretty. It'd be in a black matte. I'm trying to get a view with the actual blue color, and there's lots of light, bright natural light in here, so it'll be hard to see. But yeah. Okay.